Good morning, everybody. The Labour budget of a couple of days ago was a complete disaster for the United Kingdom. But particularly onerous, we now understand, is the element that is going to hammer farmers and the agricultural sector in the UK. Essentially, the Labour Party, the Labour government, is making war on farms and war on farmers. And they're doing this by imposing inheritance tax on agricultural land for the first time. So any combined land and business assets that are owned by somebody where they die that gets passed on to their children will be subject to inheritance tax over £1 million. Now, for ordinary people like me, £1 million sounds like a lot of money, but if you are a farmer and you've had a farm in your family for generations, the value of that agricultural land in your farm is most likely to be more than that amount of money, and much more in terms of valuing the land. But of course, they don't want to sell the land. The land is there to grow food and produce food on. And it gets passed down from generation to generation. So by saying that agricultural land over £1 million, and that will attract inheritance tax, means that just about every farm that is larger than 100 acres will need to pay inheritance tax on the land. Which is almost all farms in the country, about 70,000 of them, if according to different reports and pieces that I've read on the situation. So many of them will come up every year. Obviously, a certain proportion of them will get passed down from father to son, etc., every year. Maybe 1,000, maybe 2,000 farms every year are going to be subject to this new agricultural land inheritance tax, which means that if your father dies, who's a farmer, you're going to have to sell some of your land in order to pay an inheritance tax bill, maybe up to 20% of your land, just simply to pay a tax bill because your father has died, which I think is absolutely deplorable and disgusting. To take tax from people, inheritance tax, when a family member has died is horrible. You're hitting people on money that's already been taxed at the worst possible time when someone is bereaved. It's absolutely deplorable and it's nasty. And then to apply this to farms as well means that the country is now putting at risk our food security. It's essentially, if you're hit with a big inheritance tax on your agricultural land, a bill for that, you're either going to have to sell the whole thing and then, take the 80% for yourself, put it in the bank. Not that banks are particularly safe these days because of bail-in legislation, and then use the 20% to pay off the inheritance tax bill you've got. Or you'll have to sell off a part of your land to somebody in order to pay your bill. Well, you know what? Neither of those things are neither of those two things are ideal for multi-generational farmers who have looking after and stewarding land which has come down through the generations, through the centuries. So either if you have to sell off a portion of your land, your farmland, or you have to sell off the whole thing, what that means is one of two things. There's less food going to be grown by the original farmer, whether it's a little bit less or all of it. And then big multinational corporations like BlackRock and companies linked to Bill Gates and whatever, maybe Chinese corporations, Vanguard, I don't know, hedge funds are going to come in and swoop in to pick up that land on the cheap and then buy up the countryside. And buy up farmland in the UK until they've got more and more of it. And what some of them want to do is start using that land to produce not wholesome, healthy food, but GMO, ultra vaccinated, Franken foods, which you're going to see more of. if they come in and implement the plans that they've got to. And the plans are all there for everybody to see. The Sainsbury's food report, for example, you can look it up and read it, and it's like a nightmare for the future of food. This is all out there. It's all part of Agenda 2030. This communist Labour government that we've got does not want people to have private property. So it goes completely along with their underlying agenda, which is to impose the principles of the Marxist Communist Manifesto. That there shouldn't be a nation. They don't like families. They shouldn't be private property, and there shouldn't be any Christianity. Those are four things that the Marxist Communist Manifesto says that should be abolished. And well, this budget goes some way to creating the conditions to abolish private property, because people's property is going to be stolen from them by the government through inheritance tax at the point where a family member dies. Now, my opinion and the policy of the Heritage Party is that there shouldn't be inheritance tax. It doesn't bring in a huge amount of money anyway for the government compared to other things, compared to VAT and capital gains tax and income tax and national insurance. That's where they get the bulk of taxation money from. So inheritance tax doesn't bring in a lot of money, but it's essentially it's a Marxian class war method of taxation in order to destroy intergenerational wealth and property and the ownership of private property. And the thing is, the ultra wealthy, the people who have 30, 50, 100 million pounds, they don't pay inheritance tax, because you know what they do? They park their money abroad, their liquid assets they park them in the Virgin Islands or Singapore or wherever. They domicile themselves abroad so they don't have to pay inheritance tax in the UK. And if they have illiquid assets, infrastructure or land, they put them in a trust where it's untouchable by the government. So they know how to get around these things. I think a lot of people might be looking at, how do trusts work and so on. Again, I'm not a financial advisor. I'm not giving financial advice, but someone commented, but a number of people have commented over the last couple of days, well, if you put your property in a trust, then you can get around inheritance tax. That's what the ultra wealthy do. Now, again, I'm not an expert on these things. You have to look into that yourself. I'm just repeating what some of the comments were that was said and have been said over the last couple of days. But I mean, to be honest, this shouldn't be happening. There should not be an inheritance tax raid on farmland, because it's going to, of course, deliberately and quite obnoxiously destroy farms and destroy generations and families being able to hand down their farms and farmland that's been farmed for centuries to the next generation and the generations that come after us. So this Labour government, with Rachel Reeves as the first female chancellor, is destroying our heritage. So they're not something to celebrate whatsoever. They're something to get rid of as soon as we possibly can, peacefully at the ballot box, of course, so that we can get back to restoring and maintaining and looking after and stewarding our heritage rather than destroying it, which is what the Starmer regime is doing.